MatthewRSimmons, Twilight in the Desert, The Coming Saudi Oil Shock and the World Economy. In Twilight in the Desert, The Coming Saudi Oil Shock and the World Economy, MatthewRSimmons examines the alarming reality that the seemingly endless Saudi oil supply might soon end. The book navigates the history of Saudi Arabia's oil hegemony, the complexity of the oil industry, and the challenges posed by the country's dependence on oil. By investigating the Saudi oil fields and the possible consequences of their depletion, Simmons urges the world to prepare for an era of higher energy costs and declining production, and to find alternative energy sources before it's too late.
Saudi Arabia's oil, securing an unpredictable future. The book is a comprehensive analysis of the global oil market, with a particular focus on the oil-rich state of Saudi Arabia. It outlines the historical, social, and economic factors that have contributed to the country's successful oil industry and identifies the main challenges it faces in the future. The global economy is heavily dependent on oil, and Saudi Arabia has long been a crucial player in the global oil market. However, as the book outlines, the Saudi oil industry is facing a difficult future due to a combination of factors such as declining production rates and the need for economic diversification. The book provides a detailed history of Saudi Arabia and how the country moved from being destitute to becoming one of the world's wealthiest nations. It highlights the role played by King Abdul Aziz in capturing Riyadh and establishing control over the various clans, towns, and regions in the country. It also discusses the Ikhwan and the strict religious controls that still pervade Saudi society. The book delves into the complexity of the oil supply process, from exploration geology to product distribution and use. It emphasizes that Saudi Arabia's oil industry is not simple and likens it to the proverbial rocket science. The author explains that Saudi Arabia's oil production comes from just 6 giant fields, all of which are mature and have been producing oil at high rates for half a century. The country injects massive amounts of water into these underground reservoirs to maintain well pressures. The book stresses that the twilight of Saudi Arabian oil is not a remote fantasy, as 90% of all oil that Saudi Arabia has ever produced derives from 7 giant fields. Moreover, the book warns that once the output of each key oil field starts to decline from current levels, there is likely to be a sudden and steep drop-off. This should raise concerns about the future of energy security globally. The Middle East possesses 63% of all the world's oil, and Saudi Arabia's proven oil reserves account for about 23% of all known petroleum reserves globally. This abundance of oil has led many observers to believe that the Saudi oil binge might never end. The book also highlights the challenges facing Saudi Arabia's oil industry. The country needs to modernize its oil industry and diversify its economy. Although Saudi Arabia created the Saudi Arabia Basic Industries Corporation, SABIC, in 1975 to develop a national petrochemical industry, much more needs to be done. The government needs to provide social services to its citizens, many of whom are young and need employment opportunities. The need to handle debt remains crucial, as does the need to reduce unemployment, create new jobs, grow the economy, and develop new industries. While Saudi Arabia spends heavily on infrastructure, its per capita gross domestic product, GDP, remains below $8,000 annually. In conclusion, the book provides a comprehensive analysis of Saudi Arabia's role in the global oil market. While the country has been successful in producing oil for many years, the book highlights the many challenges it faces in the future. The author warns that without significant economic diversification, the decline in Saudi oil production will have significant adverse consequences on the global economy. The real story behind Saudi Arabia's oil production. By reducing the production rates of individual wells in the late 1970s and again during the Gulf War, Saudi Arabia attempted to give its oil fields a rest and allow well pressures to rebuild. While the country's willingness to ease jittery markets caused long-term damage to its ability to produce oil, it followed a pattern of decreasing and increasing output to manage the supply. Most petroleum engineers agree that more oil gets left behind in the ground when wells are pushed to overproduce. Saudi Arabia also concealed the true condition and extent of aging of its principal fields, and the economic challenges embedded in its population explosion are daunting. Saudi Arabia's oil reserves, approaching an end. Saudi Arabia, the world's leading oil producer, is facing a crucial challenge as its oil reserves may dwindle in the near future. With no alternative to Saudi oil, the world is at risk of facing severe oil shortages. To tackle this challenge, Saudi Aramco, the country's oil company, employs sophisticated technology to extract more oil, yet this comes at an increased cost of production. Despite having 83 oil fields, 90% of its production comes from only 6, with the king of all kings, Ghawar oil field being the greatest. However, all of these fields may have peaked and may not produce additional oil in the coming years. The bottom line is that, even with its advanced technology, Saudi Arabia's oil reserves may run out sooner than expected, and the world must prepare for this eventuality. Saudi oil and the impending decline. Saudi Arabia's oil reserves and production face challenges causing a decline, but predictions remain uncertain as to when and how soon. Saudi Arabia boasts vast proven oil reserves of over 262 billion barrels. However, estimating reserves could be an unreliable process, and recovery percentages remain unclear. In the past, Aramco had to downgrade some 70 billion barrels of reserves to possible due to challenges such as saltwater invasion and lowering pumping pressure. The decline in oil production is inevitable, and the world is not adequately prepared for it. Aramco no longer discloses reserves on a field-by-field basis, with its proven reserves spiking in 1979 and 1988 by 150 billion and 100 billion barrels, respectively. Predicting the precise point of precipitous decline is difficult, somewhat similar to predicting the productive life of an elderly person. Some experts argue that Saudi fields are already in technical difficulties. Speculations vary regarding when Saudi oil production will decline. Optimists agree with the country's projection of producing 15 million barrels of oil per day for the next 50 years, while pessimists believe that the predictions color Saudi's fear of losing global predominance once their oil production falls. As the oil's depletion nears its end, the world must prepare for the decline and its consequences. The looming energy crisis. As the world's demand for energy continues to grow, societies are faced with the challenge of meeting their energy needs. This challenge is exacerbated by the dwindling supply of oil, which is causing intense competition among energy consumers. The assumption that the Saudi oil miracle will continue forever is a global danger, and the lack of alternative scenario thinking is a significant risk. Therefore, a Plan B must be developed to prepare for an era of higher energy costs and post-peak production. This includes alternative energy sources, new technologies to increase production, and more enlightened patterns of energy consumption. Although finding a Plan C in the form of a scientific breakthrough or energy miracle seems challenging, transitioning to a future where humanity is no longer dependent on oil is possible. The success of this transition lies in diagnosing the problem in time to do something about it. Historically, times of great challenge and stress have brought about periods of the greatest human ingenuity, and the twilight of Saudi Arabia's oil production could launch the era of a more enlightened and sustainable global society.
As the world faces the possibility of dwindling oil supply from Saudi Arabia, it must be prepared to develop and rely on alternative energy sources. Simmons emphasizes the need for a Plan B to tackle the potential energy crisis following the end of Saudi Arabia's oil dominance. This plan may include alternative sources, new technologies, and more mindful energy consumption patterns. A successful transition from an oil-dependent society to a more sustainable one will depend on the world's ability to recognize the problem and act quickly. The twilight of Saudi Arabia's oil production may bring both challenges and opportunities, but it signals the need for a better prepared and more sustainable global society.